sending to outer space to find another race.
Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, born Edward Alexander Crowley in Leamington Spa, about 1875, I believe. Son of a brewer. His family were members of the Plymouth Brethren, which is not the same as Quakerism, but has some of the same qualities, a Calvinistic type of Protestantism, where they reject the idea of established church. Very complex background. Getting into Crowley's biography would take forever. Suffice it to say that he was raised more or less in the form of an only child in a closed family, upper middle class, no sensible contact with life as we know it in public schools until later, and a man of remarkable literary talent and talent in some other areas on the level of genius. Social skills questionable, business skills non-existent. So all these things came together. Royce was looking for something to keep O.T.O. going. Crowley was looking for something to get going. Crowley had been more or less pushed out of the Order of the Golden Dawn. He had formed his own AA organization to replace it, claiming mystical authority to be the Order of the Golden Dawn that had been formed by others, Mathers and Westcott and Woodford. But over time, Crowley's religious writings, which have their origin in 1904, when he had a mystical experience and wrote down what's called the Book of the Law, became more and more into the center of O.T.O. The general term for this is Thelema. It's a term that is found in 15th century writing in the French. And the basic principle is that every one of us has a will, semi-divine part of ourselves. And we're here to do that will. It's close to the idea of destiny. It's not the idea of inclination or desire. Those are considered to be barriers to understanding your will. What you're in life to do, that's your will. And finding that at odd times during life is the goal of a large part of Thelema. O.T.O. being structured along Masonic lines with initiations designed to commemorate and suggest the stages of life, from childhood to coming of age, to marriage or forming a family, to taking a role in society. Just naturally fit with that. So Crowley rewrote the rituals at Royce's suggestion, since if he had not, they would be subject to suit by Masonic organizations. There were originally lifts from such things. And after Royce died in the early 20s, Crowley became the head of the order. And one thing led to another, and here we are today.
Would you tell us about what is Magick?
Well, this is something easy to say and impossible to say. The easy part about it is Magick is any deliberate, willful act leading to a result. Unfortunately, attempts to define it in such a way violate Aristotle. The classic definition is something that broadly localizes a meaning, and then another thing that comes in to pin it down to a unique meaning. Crowley's definition for Magick is essentially that it's any result of a willful intent. So Magick is making things appear out of thin air. Magick is learning how to play golf. Magick is balancing your checkbook, which is perhaps more remarkable a feat than some of the others. So it's both the mysterious and the mundane. It simply amounts to taking responsibility for carrying your intentions out.
Okay.
And assuming that that is what happened, regardless of what happened. If it doesn't turn out the way you want, obviously you were not in touch with your true will at the time. Your true will cannot be frustrated. Therefore, whatever happened is what's supposed to happen.
Okay.
It's a curious thing. There are many matters of that kind, contradictions logically, obvious rationalizations logically, but the mind doesn't work in an ironclad, inflexible way. And these notions, such as Magick, magic spelled with the old K added on the end, of Crowley's, often have that character. That you have an idea and another idea, and you put them together, and they may have some fundamental contradiction between them, but the result manifests. So the principle is that logic or reason is a damned thing. At best a tool to polish the results of what you do, to make consistent your actions, thoughts, and words, but not to govern. So if you can't figure out why part A goes with part B to make things C, be content that you've got C. That's a large part of all these ideas. Back around 1969, 70, 71, I became interested in things of this nature. I'd gotten a subscription to something called the Library of Science Book Club, and they had a recreational section in their listing, as well as technical books. And they offered Confessions of Aleister Crowley. So I bought it, read it, found it interesting. I'd experimented with membership in Amor. Didn't find that to be going terribly far, but it was a good thing in its way. Tried O.T.O, Builders of the Addendum. That was very good for some things, but again, it didn't really carry me where I was going. When I was taking my master's in physics, I had a little extra time one semester. This was during the riots in San Francisco State and all that kind of the hippie period and every other thing going on. Very interesting times. Took me years mourning the fading of that time. It was a wonderful period. And a little extra time in that semester, there was a class offered in the university, the history of magic and mysticism in the 15th century. Well, I applied for it. It turned out to have a packed waiting hall, and it was required that you had to show that you had some background to take this course to weed out all the people that wanted it. Since I had had my undergraduate at a Catholic college, I had some 16 units of theology, including patristics, and that got me in. Came into a little money. I bought the syllabus. Many of the books that were listed, several hundreds of them, and started my reading with that. Interest in Crowley, so I was able to find some of his first editions coming on the market. The Hermetic Brotherhood had just sold its library in Oakland. That was one of the precursor organizations to O.T.O, as I found out later. But that gave me a lot of interesting first editions and so forth. I met people through that class, including one fellow who knew of, but not personally knew, Grady McMurtry. He had a name wrong. He thought it was Patrick McMurtry. So I became aware that O.T.O existed. I read more about it. I heard something of the doings of the members. There were attempts to get it started that folded in that period. And about 8 years later, at a birthday party at Stephen Abbott's place in Oakland, I met Grady McMurtry. Little time passed, met him again, and we'd exchanged phone numbers. He called me, said, I have this class, maybe you'd be interested in attending it. I said, I have this class, maybe you would be interested in attending it. We traded, so neither one of us paid. One thing led to another, and in 77, he was a visitor at my home in San Anselmo, and we got to talking about yet another try to start up O.T.O. And I agreed. We put our classes together, and there were enough people that wanted to do it, and that was the first large, that is to say more than 2 or 3, initiation in O.T.O. in 40 years. The Oath of the Abyss, to paraphrase it, is a swearing that you will take everything that happens as a direct communication of the divine with your soul. That means everything. So the usual interpretation is that at that point you commit yourself to be stark raving paranoid. Everything you notice is somebody telling you something. Well, the warning is that you can go crazy from taking this oath. This is definitely hair on the palm of your hands kind of stuff. Fantasies and horrors, and if you take that seriously, you better be in a monastery where nothing much happens. It is possible that that was Jack's understanding. That is the common interpretation. But as a formal oath in the context from which it arose, that is to say the Order of the Golden Dawn, for an exempt adept, a person at a mystical stage about to make a great journey across what is called the abyss. And the abyss is the division between the mundane and the spiritual. A lot more than that, but that's simple enough to think. In our lives, we have things that make sense and things that we sense. There's a lot of material stuff around here, and our lives are ordered by it. In our minds and in our souls, we dream of a perfect life, where everything is right and God is in his heaven, or hers, or its. Between these two, there is a gulf. It is the purpose of the exempt adept to, in life, transcend this gulf and become what the Order of the Golden Dawn and AA call a Magister Templi. The moment in which this voyage begins is the taking of the Oath of the Abyss. The example I gave as to its meaning a bit ago is not the meaning that it would carry at that moment. At that moment, it simply means you don't interpret anything. Everything is a communication of the divine with your soul. Don't try to make it say something it doesn't. Don't put a spin on it. Don't say, this looks like, or I hear my angel speaking. Eliminate all that. There's no middleman, no messiah, no spokesperson, not even the shadow of a memory of what you learned as a child between you and the divine. That's what the oath means. And only a person who's ready for that experience can actually take that oath. Otherwise, they're wandering around gibbering at trees because they saw a shadow.
What do you know about?
Well, again, I'm going secondhand here, but from what I understand of people that knew Jack, and nobody actually saw this happen, but they were within ear sound of it, there apparently were 2 explosions. Jack had no reason to take his own life and no occasion to be clumsy, and he was indeed skilled. According to his widow, he had testified occasionally as an expert witness in court trials. There was one fellow who had been convicted of attempting to cause mayhem or something else of that nature by the use of explosives. And Jack had testified at his trial, and the fellow was very upset about this, spent his time in jail making threats, and had gotten out not long before this incident. So Jack's widow had the theory, which she could not prove, but nonetheless held, that this fellow may have secreted an explosion near the premises, under the floor, in back, some device that went off, and although in itself apparently would not have been sufficient, mercury fulminate, which Jack had in quantity as a explosive expert, is very sensitive to shock. And I understand that he was moving some of those chemicals at that time from one place to another. That initial explosion, if that's in fact did occur, could very well have either caused him to drop the mercury fulminate or set it off in his hand. And that would be sufficient to account for what happened. See, there's no one seems to know any reason other than this one fellow who had just gotten out of jail why anyone would want to harm Jack. Because he was a person not widely known to have enemies. But there's nothing like sending the guy up to jail that'll get you a couple of enemies.
You know, Pan plays into the story, at least in the oral history of Jack Parsons. Because at one point, there's a story recalled by a scientist at JPL that mentioned him stopping, before they did the test firing, going off and doing an incantation.
Well, wouldn't you pray before you touched off by explosives?
Yeah, I bet I would. I mean, that's the thing. But if you could tell us about the Greek deity Pan, I think that'd be helpful.
Good luck on that one. It's not a simple deity.
Yeah.
More of the later period, apparently. Pan literally means all. So Pan is an all deity. Now, you're not used to, in the West, thinking of deities as guys with specialties. And in a sense, that is a little bit inaccurate, too, because they're like people. They're usually derived from human beings that lived in some time and whose lives have become mythical. That's the normal way you get gods. Somebody tells a story and it goes and gets big enough, and sooner or later, Jesus Christ. But in the case of Pan, the main worship seems to have arisen in the origins of the old mystery cults. They were like a modern religion in the sense that one god comes and displaces the others, and sometimes is considered to be older or more primal or more universal. Pan is a god of nature. All of nature. No exceptions. Up here at this farm where I'm speaking, sometimes the north wind blows. You don't get this sort of thing in the cities, but when you're out here and there's so much land and nature's closer, when the north wind blows in this part of California, people become morose, sad, maybe in some extreme cases even suicidal. It's a tangible effect. It's a hand of death moving. But then when you look apart from that notion, at a rabbit with its ears jacked up in the field, you can see a little humanness, or you can watch what it's doing. The quail go by, the butterflies, the plants, the weeds keep coming up and coming up and coming up, and when you kill that lot, there's another kind of weed that doesn't cut the same way. All that is Pan. Every thought in your mind, every feeling you've ever had is Pan, except the thoughts that are those of the little monkey that try to jigger it all and make some abstract truth of it. Pan isn't abstract. That's Pan. All living nature. William Blake once had a vision. He had many visions, but in this one vision, the universe was filled with eyes looking at him, like shaped like the eyes on a peacock's tail, but all of them were looking at him and saw him without barrier or without deception, even his own self-deception. That's the eye of Pan. Except when Crowley says it, in which case it can also mean a phallus. So Pan is the god of nature, not some little god, but real. See, there are different kinds of gods. There are abstract ones, fictional ones, mythical ones, metaphoric ones. And they're the gods you look at and it looks back. That's the kind of god Pan is. Like Akhenaten's one god of the Egyptians. He trashed all the other Egyptian gods and became what is in effect an atheist, except he had one caveat. He looked at the disk of the sun and said, that, without question, is God. That kind of God is Pan. Okay, that's 2 bits.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it true that in some sense when Christianity came along, they adopted that picture or that presence or that deity and kind of subjugated it to a form of evil? I mean...
Well, you'll find a lot of that, but I think you'll also find that Christianity is the great syncretic religion of the West. That is a religion formed of all other religions. This is controversial, but not to someone who isn't a Christian. To them, it makes good sense. But in something like Pan, what you have is many different things in Christianity. Bits and pieces of it are used positively and some negatively. Johannes Kircher wrote a dissertation in his large book on the god Pan as a metaphor of all nature. Not just as a metaphor, but as an actual thing. It's just that he presented it in the form of a metaphor. Christian writers have often used this metaphor in times somewhat distant from this one. So it's not a simple thing. Yeah. If you want the devil, you're going to have to find him in a couple of other places. You'll have to look to St. Jerome in his translation of the Old Testament into what is called the Latin Vulgate. Whenever he found anything that had to do with sex, St. Jerome got very upset. It was a problem he had that Christianity is inherited in part from him. Whenever he found something that looked nasty, he treated it as a devil. There's one occurrence of the word Lucifer in the Old Testament. It is from a part in the Hebrew Old Testament where one of the titles of a king of Babylon is Son of the Morning. Rather than translate that into Latin, Jerome wrote, Lucifer, the light carrier. And in his various letters, which have survived, he uses this and other terms to characterize anything he didn't like. And what he mainly didn't like was fooling around. There's one rather remarkably negative letter by Jerome to some poor little guy that was, well, something of a shyster. He was a presbyter, like a priest, or something almost a bishop, and he was known for marrying him and dumping him, and fooling around sexually. And Jerome has this horrendous rip and tear letter. Well, that's the context that started the devil in Christianity. Satan in the Old Testament means district attorney. You want a Satan? Best model I know is Ed Meese under Ronald Reagan. District attorney. The guy who's supposed to prosecute you, set you up, and trap you, and jolly well do his job. Read the book of Job if you want to find out what that's about. But over the years, and we're talking centuries, until around the 1000th year of Christianity, there really was no such notion as a devil. And things like Pan were party people. fun stuff. Frightening in its way, joyous in its way, not related to these notions. Around the beginning of that critical period, the 8th century and thereabouts, there are a lot of really serious problems with Visigoths and other sordid, unsavory people from Eastern Europe. Different people live there now, no offense intended. But these people, derived from Teutonic lines or what have you, lived in places where things were a little bit nasty. And they had nasty gods to go with it. And these gods formed the model of the devil. Jerome started the theological usage of things of this kind. And a heresy, as is characterized by Roman Catholicism of the time, although they didn't make that distinction in those days, called Manichaeanism, had developed. This was a belief in the manner of the old Parsees or Aramazda, the god of good and the god of evil, equal, two brothers, one good, one bad, fighting for the world, and Aramazda the god over all. Well, this is most certainly not Christian, at least as Christianity is usually described. There is no god of evil equal to the good God. You can't have monotheism with such a belief. It is absolutely impossible. But Manichaeanism and Arianism, a related view, became popular among the Roman legions. You have to think of something where you enlist in an army and it's mostly foot soldiers work and sticking people with knives and trying to avoid getting stuck. That's a hard life. And in such a life there is a necessary imposition of a belief in good and evil. Not moral good, not moral evil. Those are shadows, abstractions. Good in the old Roman sense meant good for you. Evil meant ouch, bad, pain, suffering, death. So for a soldier, you got good, you got evil, no big problem. We know which. If it's good, you're alive and drinking wine. If it's bad, you're dead or getting there quickly. So it's a natural soldier's religion to have a belief in a God of good and evil. Theirs is a bad God, ours is the good God. Simple. Yeah. So whatever you do, don't screw with it if it works. So the Roman legions gradually developed this soldier's religion, and you can't tell the army to go away.
No.
You can't say, okay, there's only one little problem, you're all wrong, and now we'll do it this way.
Right.
They don't do that. So by the time people realize that, hey, there's this little problem, we're not Christians anymore, at least if we're Christians, we're not monotheists anymore, because there's all these people and these preachers and the church is talking about the devil. We didn't used to have one of those, did we? And then the rest sets in. I think the ultimate degradation that we see of it is something occasionally I've heard. Someone will say, not knowing perhaps what they are saying, but perhaps believing it, that they wouldn't believe in Christ if it wasn't for fear of the devil. That is a statement of a person who has ceased forever to be a Christian. In any definition of it I know. Mm-hmm. So what's Pan? Pan is an innocent bystander.
He got caught up.
Yeah, he looks funny. I mean, them goat feet will do it every time.